Hello and welcome to the GhostÉire Channel. My name is Anthony Kerrigan, and tonight we're going to be talking to editor, researcher, and author Michael J. Letchins. Thank you for coming on the show there, Michael.
My pleasure, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to be having you on, and some fantastic subjects coming up tonight. We're going to be talking to Michael about Ossuary Churches, also incorruptibility, and finally Catholic ghost stories there. I just got a few shout outs. Jonathan. Hi, Jonathan from County Fermanagh. How are you doing? Hope you're keeping well. Hope you're dry as well. Hope you're keeping well. And hi, Jennifer, my wife there. Keeping as well. So, first of all, oh, yes. So, if you want to ask Michael a question, feel free to put them on this live feed. You can also go to our website, www.ghostera.net, go to the contact page. If you have a personal message, just put in brackets private message. We are coming live from Facebook here, but also on our website. On the homepage, www.ghostera.net, you see a red button that says GhostÉire Channel. Just click on that button and that will bring you to the live broadcast. You can also see past shows and see what is coming up on the future from there. If you're affiliated with any paranormal team or tourist attraction, feel free to name the group or the organization, and we'll also give a shout out to you. There's also a competition tonight, folks, where you have the opportunity to put your name into the Halloween mega draw and also win some cash prizes. Well, just cash, sorry. But to do so, you have to comment on tonight's feed and you'll be in with a chance. So, Michael, how you doing? First of all, thanks, Jonathan. You said all good. That's great. Great, Jonathan. That's great. Michael, what are Ossuary churches?
Ossuary churches are probably most popularly known as bone churches. Comes from the Latin word for bone, os. That's where we get osteoporosis and things like that. uh, what
Oh, okay.
uh, and what they are is they are sometimes elaborately, but very often simply churches that are decorated with human bones from people who had died, and been buried in either the courtyard or the church itself.
Okay. And like, have you visited any of these these sites?
Oh yes,
Can you explain what a few of them like? What do you experience when you? What is it like the surroundings around them?
yes, I've been to some all in three different countries, and
Okay.
there are a couple famous ones. Probably the most famous is the Capuchin crypt in beneath Santa Maria of the Conception in Rome, and that one has the
Okay.
bones of 5,000 Capuchin friars that decorate three chapels in the crypt of the church. I went there first as a student studying in Rome, and I didn't know what to expect. I kind of wanted something ooky spooky, a little creepy because I love those things. And I get
Mm.
in there, and the first thing you see is an image of Lazarus being raised from the dead, which in the Gospels, Lazarus was a friend of Christ who had fallen ill and died. And Christ went
Mm.
to raise him from the dead, but promised that this resurrection would be available to everyone. And so that's the first theme you get. And the whole thing is, I would call a gut punch of memento mori, which is the Latin phrase remember death. It's not just a Catholic phrase, it's been around since at least the Stoics in Rome. But it's an
Mm.
idea that we remember death, and that paradoxically, by preparing ourselves for what the saints call a good death, we actually live a good life. And that's the theme you get beneath all the smiling skulls and the chandeliers made of leg bones and all the other things that you see in an ossuary.
Yeah. 'Cause, I was going to ask you that because there was any symbolization with how they are positioned and all that, you know. But
Oh,
are
yes.
these are these? I'll come to that in a minute. But is there any? Are these places haunted? Have they got any haunted stories to them? I bet they
you
have.
know, they're I'm sure they have. I haven't heard any direct ones other than
Mm.
tourists getting a lot of tourists are just so overwhelmed that if there are ghosts, they almost go unnoticed, I think. But I would not be surprised if they had. You can feel the spirituality of the place because, like, for example, in almost every ossuary I've been in, there's been some sign, usually in Latin, but often in other languages, that basically says, what you are now, we once were. What we are now, you shall be. And that's a direct call to remember death and the universality of death itself. So if there was ever a place where the living and the dead seem to kind of hang out together, an ossuary is perfect.
And like as you said, these there's kind of familiar ones there. You know, special ones. It's the Paris Catacombs. Are they a sort of ossuary?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they collect dozens of ossuaries because of the catacombs' uniqueness in all of Europe. You know, there's so many miles of tunnels that you can easily, people do get lost in them. But
Hmm.
there are several chapels that are made out of bones. So you can find some of them, quite a few of them are open to tourists. I haven't been to Paris yet, so I can't speak on it, but it's definitely on my to-do list.
Hmm. And like we've got a few photographs here because thankfully being Burnley there, you gave them showed them that you allowed me to show them tonight. So
Yes.
where was this taken there, Michael?
So chances are I gave you photos from two different ossuaries. The first one is from
Hmm.
San Bernardino alla Asse in Milan. It's not
Hmm.
too far from the Milan Duomo. So it is a beautiful, formerly hospital church. And similar to ossuaries that you find is what they basically had is that they ran out of places to bury the dead. So
Yes.
this created a unique situation because especially within cities, you're surrounded by city walls. There's not a lot of space to bury the dead. So they would often take, after a body had decomposed, they would take all the bones, collect them in a charnel house or a box, and place those bones in a church. So still keeping them together and have a
Hmm.
fresh plot to bury someone. But sometimes they
Yeah.
ran out of spaces to even put the bones. And this is where the decorations start to come in. So, as well
Hmm.
as being memento mori and symbolic of our struggle with life and death, it's also was a practical measure, if you can believe it.
Hmm. And like well, most of these, like as you mentioned, Milan what kind of is it just over population or was there a sort of plague there or was it heavily
Almost,
during the,
almost always, it's plague. You can actually, in many ossuaries, such as the one in Brno, Czech Republic, you can actually see the discoloration of bones. They'll take on this kind of gray yellowish tint when they had plague, and there were just so many bodies from the plague. You have to remember, for Americans, it's hard for us to understand, but at some point, like places would lose up to 50% of their population in just a matter of a decade. And if you can imagine that, like just so many people, bodies are piling everywhere. They had to come up with a lot of creative solutions for burial, and ossuaries are just one of them.
yes. This is this set in Milan as well? Yeah, this is just the ceiling, is it above it?
Yes, so that's I'm forgetting the name of the artist, but it is the Triumph of the Holy Souls in Purgatory. So it's supposed to depict the fresco is to depict the souls in purgatory finally making it to heaven. So it's like a lot of ossuaries do. It's a call to remember not only your own death, but to remember the people who had passed away already and to keep them in prayer. And in Catholicism, we have a belief that not only do we get to pray for the dead, but oftentimes the dead also pray for us. So it's kind
Mm,
of a interesting relationship we still have with the dead.
yes. And there's another, I think it's the same area, the same building. Now this is a very. Is this is this in Milan as well? Would this be?
I can't see the image, but
Oh,
if
it's, it's with the monks kind of
that's
attire.
in so that's in the Capuchin crypt in Rome. So that was all the bones in there are from Capuchin friars who had died in their monastery or who had been previously dead in their previous monastery, but they moved the bones to the new church when it was
Mm,
completed in 1660. And so those monks are all clad in their robes to again remind you that these men did walk around. They had vocations, they had jobs, and now they are bones and dust. And almost all of, and those are the monks who hold the sign that tells you we were just like you will be just like us.
All right. Okay. I know yeah. I suppose you have to show signs of what can, like, death is formidable. Like, it's going to
Hmm.
inevitable. Like, it's going to happen to us there. But as you mentioned, the bones is I've heard somewhere like do some bones be crossed? Do they symbolize things like the femur, like in some ways of representing strength? And like clothes. Do you see like any? Have you seen anybody unusually dressed in attire, different clothing that are kind of in these ossuaries?
No, they're usually dressed as monks or priests if they're dressed at all. You
Hmm.
will see other symbolism, though. For example, the I mentioned the painting of Lazarus that is in the Capuchin crypt in Rome. So before you enter that ossuary, you have the raising of Lazarus, but then you will have finger bones that decorate the side of that painting to give it a little
Okay.
frame. And that's a symbolism of Christ using his own hands to raise people from the dead. So,
Okay.
these hands are now part of remembering the raising of the dead. And likewise, you'll find symbolism with they'll use, I believe it's in Sedlec in the Czech Republic, just outside of Prague, where they have a chandelier that is made of every human bone that you would find in the human body, and it's
Hmm.
done to give light, uh,
Oh, yes.
to show the light of the dead that still shines, and we still remember them. And so, yes, they'll, depending on who the artist is, they'll play around with a lot of rich symbolism that, I'll be honest, completely went over my head the first time I went to Auschwitz.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense though. It does make sense, like a
Yes.
chandelier, the light. It's very very good, like. Bridget says hi, Anthony, and all. How you doing, Bridget, from Seekers of the Afterlife? Jonathan
Oh,
says that there is one in Italy. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of as well. I think it's called Paloma. There's like a kind of catacombs there with bones there. I think there's monks there. I know there's.
yes.
Hmm.
In Palermo, actually, Palermo, Sicily, the Capuchin friars also have a crypt there. Where that one is interesting because, and this you can find in other crypts, such as St. Mician's in Dublin, where the
Hmm.
conditions were just right for the mummification of bodies. So
Hmm.
it's not quite an ossuary in that they decorate with bones, but you see just really fascinating cases of mummification in these churches that also lean heavily into the memento mori aspects of our faith.
Hmm. Yeah, it's. I remember. Yeah, I know it's featured. I think it was featured in a few kind of ghost hunting paranormal programs. There, I think the actually most haunted were got permission to go down there and
Oh,
investigate there.
wow.
If I can remember there. If these like what I was going to say. Are there any details of new Ossuary churches appearing? I know it might sound unusual, but would there be anything of that on another scale? I suppose it's mostly Western civilization would be, I suppose, with the Catholic Church, would it?
Yes. And I don't know of any ossuaries that have been, there are places that still house bones, but not necessarily in these macabre decorations you see in places like Italy or the Czech Republic or
Hmm.
France or Spain. But there are still buildings that will house bones, especially if cemeteries are practicing the plot of moving bodies to create room for new dead and things like that. But nothing I've seen elaborately decorated since the 1600s.
Yes. Yeah. I suppose it all depends on, as you said, it depends on if there's a plague or a mass, like a war, or I suppose would
Mhm.
like natural disasters as well. Would that be a common thing there? I suppose with places.
Certainly. And I mentioned war. One of the most interesting ossuaries was the Brno ossuary in the Moravian part of the Czech Republic, right near the Austrian border. And what was interesting about that is some of the skulls had bullet wounds from the Czech Republic. The Czech lands have been under war a lot of times in history, and they included some of the first full scale wars fighting with guns. So you get to
Hmm.
see skulls from the 1500s that are some of the earliest bullet wounds, and that is, uh, just as someone who studies history, it is so fascinating and horrific as well. Like, you can't imagine what it must have been like to be a farmer meeting guns for the first time.
Yes, yeah, and you got this interest as well. I'm going to talk about the book later on that you've written as well. The weird Catholic stories, weird Catholic handbook. But what got you fascinated first into doing what you're doing now, like the history of that?
Oh, I would say it would have to be my childhood. I had a very, very active family who loved to tell weird stories and ghost stories. And my aunt and my grandma loved to tell old stories about saints meeting monsters or what have you. And, you know, growing up in the Pacific Northwest, we all believed in Sasquatch or Bigfoot, whatever you want to call him. So I always
Mm,
had a fascination with the unusual and the strange. And then as I grew up and was studying history, I kept stumbling upon places like ossuaries or mummified remains or incorruptibles, things like that. And I found also ghost stories, and all these stories I basically kept collecting as side projects to my main research. And before I knew it, I had a bunch of stories I collected and I wanted to tell them to everyone.
mm. Yeah, it's. I never really. I didn't. I know. I knew of these churches, but I never knew myself there. I didn't categorize them there. I didn't know what they were. And as you said, you mentioned St. Michan's there, and what came into my head as well is in Kilkenny, County Kilkenny in Ireland. There's Ossuary there as well. I think it's named
Oh,
after the book of Ossuary. I think it's the book of Ossuary. It was a book written, but I think there were bones found around there in the church there. No, I don't know. I don't think they've got them on display or anything there, especially in the church there. But there's 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 numerous relics as well that that people go and see as well. Um, is there any like organs like many? I know it's like maybe completely weird question, but do organs
yes.
get kept?
Yes. In fact, in the Czech Republic, there is a chapel that is dedicated to what was thought to be the incorrupt tongue of St. John Nepocene or St. John of Bohemia, whatever you might call him,
Hmm.
who was famously martyred because he wouldn't reveal the secrets of the confessional to the king. And his tongue was found to be preserved after he was in the ground for so many years. And so they
Right.
built a chapel literally dedicated to this preserved tongue to
Right.
him. It's a beautiful church. It was designed by, I'm forgetting the name of the architect, but one of the great architects of Czech Baroque architecture. So, yes, there are places that preserve organs.
Yes. Yeah, I know there's a case there of my friend Dr. Kieran O'Keefe, who's been on Most Haunted. He's a parapsychologist there, but he was asked. I think he was asked to go to Spain to investigate blood or something like that. Some blood that would.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I forget now that, but yeah, it was blood that they would bring it out of where it's supposed to be kept, and it would it would turn from a hard substance into blood, and thinks the blood of some
Yes.
saint. Would you
St.
know about that?
Gennaro.
Mm,
St. Gennaro.
yes,
Yeah. San
yes,
Gennaro. His blood will lick. It goes from a hard, dry substance and will liquefy. I can't remember how often. It does it pretty frequently, but
mm,
it's one of the stranger, like, even my most devout family members will hear about that and go, okay, that's a little odd even for me. So it's a
mm,
bizarre one, but it's one that gets a lot of attention because it seems to miraculously liquefy at least once a year, usually around Easter, I believe.
mm, yes. Yeah, I won't divulge too much because I think they're doing research on it at the moment. I think he's got permission to do some study on it there.
That's
So
cool.
I'll leave him to that there in case he tells me off. That's Dr. Kieran O'Keefe. Jonathan says, would Michael know anything on Navajo bones? Is that how you say it? Navajo bones.
No, unfortunately, I'm not sure what that is.
Hmm. if you can just probably if you could just put a comment there, Jonathan, roughly about what it is, what you think it is there. Irene says hello all. Are you there, Irene? How are you doing?
Hi, Irene.
Yeah, so it's gone quick. It's gone pretty quick the time there. Yeah, I've got to add a question there about Ossuary's there, but yeah, we mentioned. I suppose we mentioned the organs there. So is we mentioned the blood, and we also mentioned the organs there and the bones there. But is there any these like going back to that blood, going back to that? No, sorry, no, that there was kind of it was brought out every year, and it was supposed to be maybe because it was in a cold environment beforehand, a cold environment that it came out on a feast day, which was kind of around the summertime, spring, early summertime. Would that make it come to think that everybody else in a small room congregating that would cause the substance to melt?
I could imagine it. I could imagine there's a lot of explanations, but like it's kept in a glass reliquary that is quite. I think it's been kept like that for hundreds of years, but I think the current one is fairly new. But anyone who's kept anything in glass, like it changes. It can change with temperature and consistency, especially some thick, viscous substance like blood. So I think there's a lot of explanations to look into. It's still a fascinating, whether it's miraculous or a natural explanation. It's still a fascinating
Yes,
phenomena to observe.
it definitely is there. It's very interesting there. Jonathan says Indian Navio. Is it? Sorry if I spelled that wrong. Navio bones. Indian.
Oh, I should know more about that, but because I'm not too far from the Navajo Nation, but I don't know. Unfortunately, my knowledge of indigenous peoples in my own country is low.
No worries. I'm same as myself there. I don't know what my family are doing half the time. So, but I'm sorry, just like that. But yeah, we're going to touch on incorruptibility now shortly. Time has flown there, and it's
Oh,
very
yes.
interesting there. But first of all, I'm going to take out two names out of this lotto jar. You see this little lotto jar? Well, it's a little jar there. And we're going to see who's going to be in a chance to enter our competition, Astral Travel. So I'm going to pick the first name, and it's Irene. Irene from California. Well done, sis.
Yay.
I'm going to pick one more, another name. It's not Jennifer. My wife can't be in it, so I'll pick another name. Eugene from Afterlife Paranormal.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm not scheming stuff there, Michael. There, and I'll pick one more name just in case. Bridget as well, in case. I think Bridget, were you third the last time again? Well, maybe we'll see anyway if Irene and Eugene aren't around later on to pick the numbers. Jonathan says that's okay. Thanks. Yeah, it's like I didn't know before about the Ossuary, the kind of the categorization of it. I didn't know that there was actually a category of it, and that's kind of does happen around many towns, and I suppose you said like cities there that have been impacted by plagues and war as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to touch on to incorruptibility there, and this is very fascinating. This is another thing that I didn't know. Well, I didn't know it was coined, that kind of term. But what is incorruptibility?
Incorruptibility in the Catholic Church it's considered a miraculous phenomenon, but it is when there's no natural explanation for the preservation of the human body, in particularly the flexibility and the lack of any type of putrefaction. In fact, sometimes people will report even a sweet smell. So this will take on many forms and many stages of preservation. In some cases, they find the preservation is so complete that even with elements such as water, air, warm places, the body will still be preserved. We have mummies, of course, in the West, as we do anywhere, usually accidental mummies. But in the cases of incorrupt saints, there's no removal of organs, nothing that would indicate that there was actual mummification being practiced. But they still will be preserved even when elements would normally cause it to decompose. The body's still preserved, and you can find these incorrupt saints in churches all across Europe. But we actually had one here in America, Mother Wilhelmina, who all the way out in Missouri, which is a state kind of in the mid South. She was found just a couple years ago when they were moving her body from the graveyard to the chapel. That not only was her skin, her face, and everything else preserved after about 6 years in the ground, her habit was perfectly preserved, which for the nuns was especially a big deal. And there was no preservation done. All the local coroner confirmed that she was buried in a simple wooden box and placed in the ground where she should have decomposed, but she did not. So I don't know of any active investigations, what's going on with it, but it was a fascinating discovery. So we are still finding these incorruptible bodies that really defy explanation, even as scientists have studied it. It's still a strange phenomenon that I like. One commentator put it really well. It's kind of a little hint, as if, if we're exceedingly good, if we could do things well, we might be able to linger in this world a little longer. But it also speaks to a future resurrection, when our bodies are made intact again and perfected.
Yeah, it's kind of, I suppose you could say that Ossuary Churches, like the bones and all that, is kind of a reflection of that death is going to happen. And then I suppose the incorruptibility is kind of like the opposite. It shows that, as you said, the resurrection, person can come back to life. But it shows that kind of sense of things there. What do you think that incorrupt bodies symbolize in Catholic theology? Are they so there's signs, as you said, resurrection, purity, and also divine favor? Would that be correct? So they're chosen by God? Yes.
Yes. So incorruptibility, the church has adapted its thoughts is probably the best way to put it, because it's such a strange phenomenon. It's not even used anymore for canonization. It can't be considered one of the miracles for canonization anymore. But it's still considered a phenomenon that shows some type of divine favor, and is also giving a sense of what life is like, that death itself no longer has the great power over us that it once did, and that with a little bit of work and grace, we can actually overcome it.
Yeah, and like I suppose the person in me would probably, the rational thinker would say, are these bodies, like as you mentioned, they're not tampered with, but like sort of chemicals? Would chemicals be involved? Is there any cases where it's actually been found out? Maybe not meant to be, but with embalming, would that be true?
Yes, that there was a case I wrote about in my book, and I'm forgetting which particular saint. I can flip through my book to find it, but a pathologist from the University of not Bologna was doing some. Dr. Fulchieri did a lot of research with the Vatican to investigate incorruptibles, and in a couple he couldn't find an explanation, but in a few others he found all the signs of mummification, namely the removal of organs and the use of ointments on the skin. This was common burial practice, but sometimes if you use this particular type of ointment and placed in a cool, dry area with all the organs removed, mummification would happen. But in other cases, all the organs were still perfectly intact, and there was no other explanation to explain why. In fact, all likely explanations said the body should have decomposed, but it didn't. So it's one that scientists are still studying, and I look forward to reading more about it.
Yes, it's very, it's got it. The whole topic is very interesting there. I don't know, it's because I was looking up. I've seen it in other religions, like the Buddhist mummies as well.
Yes,
and they the corpses in other religions like that, intense meditation and dehydration before they die, and what's called dehydration and starvation Do you think the Catholic incorruptibles may have gone through this process before, knowing that they were kind of dying? Would they've stopped eating and stopped drinking?
I think it's possible, especially sometimes that just naturally happens. A person gets towards the end and they just don't want to eat or drink anymore. I've unfortunately seen that in my own family.
Mm.
But it's also a lot of these saints practiced very strict fasting. Some would live on nothing but the Eucharist for months at a time and things like that. So that's one explanation I've heard, especially for those Japanese
Mm.
monks who would basically willed themselves into preservation.
Mm.
So there's an explanation with that, and I think it's one I'd love to see explored more. When it
Mm.
comes to human science and the body, mine's still basic, so finding out more and more about this is just intriguing to me.
Yes, it is. It's very intriguing. Yes, because I've seen it. I think it was they would drink the monks some stuff that would make them even would deteriorate them even more. And I think that tree bark was. I think the resin of tree bark. They had tree bark as
Oh,
well, so that would probably preserve the insides as well. Yeah. So what's it's what um the, sorry no Michael. Um, uh, as you said, like, is there any famous ones? I remember that I've written one in a post there. I forget her name there, but there was I forget. I think another couple of years, and she's in an island off Spain. I think that's correct there. And her body was brought up after 3 years, and it showed signs that her facial complexion hadn't changed. There was blood coming out of her mouth, and her palate was fine. It was like she was
mhm.
just died yesterday. Is that
Yes.
I forget her name now. But is there any famous ones that people can visit? And
Yes. At Lourdes, which is a famous Marian shrine, you can see Saint Bernadette, who was the visionary who saw uh, the visions of Mary and the angels. She is so well preserved that she looks like she is merely sleeping. It's kind of almost chilling in a
hmm,
way. And her body is found to be also limber, which is, believe it or not, especially in the 1700s when churchmen were trying to understand incorruptibility, that was a big sign. Is the
hmm,
body flexible? Are the limbs limber and things
hmm,
like that? It was found with her. There is the seated uh, incorruptible Saint Catherine of Genoa, who was a mystic who saw purgatory and had so many great mystical things happen to her. If you're in Geneva, Italy, which is a beautiful city, anyways, you
hmm.
can go to her convent and see her. She is still sitting in the chair, like she's still in charge of everything, dressed in her full
Okay.
habit. Her skin is darkened from candles and incense, but otherwise, you can still even make out her facial features. Her hair is still looks like it's lush. And then there's a couple around Rome, namely Blessed Ludovica, and then oh gosh, I'm forgetting which pope. He's not on display anymore, but he was for a brief period of time because his body was found preserved. And I want to say that was
Hmm.
John the 23rd, a recent pope, but I can't remember. So
Right.
they are around and they are available and very fascinating to see if you get a chance.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. I'm just going to talk about it a bit more there. Quiva says, "Hi guys from Paranormal Adventures Island. How you doing,
Nice.
Quiva?" Kathy, how you doing from Para Pathways? How you doing, Kathy? Hope you enjoying the weekend. And TJ, how you doing? How you keeping? He's in the same fantasy football league as me. You doing well as well, PJ? The fantasy football. Anyway, so yeah, Incorruptible. So yeah, we're talking about, as you said, when did this all start? When people thought this was it the Catholic Church that was it a kind of thing the Catholic Church brought on to bring more people to be more to get more of a congregation, to get more people to
Mhm.
join.
It was especially like when it started, the most famous incorruptible was an early church martyr, Saint Cecilia, the patron saint of song. choirs and things like that. Her body is not on display, but when her tomb was opened in the 1600s, they found that she had died in the 4th century, but her body was preserved to a point where they could still make out the wounds on her neck from when she got nearly beheaded. And
Wow.
so that is the most famous, and that kind of started the madness, you could say, the mania about incorruptible saints, because it had been so long and it had been observed by everyone in Rome. Maderno, one of the great artists of the Renaissance, carved a beautiful statue of her incorrupt body, and that became copied and everywhere in so many churches across Europe, even in America. I've seen it, and that started the fascination, especially as kind of a counter-Reformation movement to show that the dead are still part of our faith, that we're still going to pray for the dead, build altars for them, and things like that. And especially with the Counter Reformation, we're going to richly decorate everything surrounding these incorrupt saints.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm just thinking if it was the opposite there, say if they weren't into that faith, weren't into Catholicism or any other faith, say it was just a normal person down the road and it happened to them, do you reckon it would get much, say this body's uncovered, discovered in the land, and it's still, after about 100 years, still preserved? Do you reckon that would justify being more holy than some other, like former nuns or bishops or canons?
I think it would speak a lot to, especially in our current age where the Catholic Church is trying to make people understand, what's called the priesthood of all believers, and
Mm,
that even the laity have a part to play within the church. Now, I don't know if it would get as much fanfare because within a lot of incorruptible saints, they were already declared holy and were revered even before their bodies were found preserved. But I think it would still have a fascination with people because so much of death is strange and scary. And then you throw in this mysterious preservation that defies the laws of nature as we understand them. And I think it
mm,
would cause a lot of curiosity and wonder, even if it was, Mike Smith down the street just who ran the grocery store, who
mm.
died and found out to be preserved. Even if we didn't declare him a saint, we would still be curious. I know I would still want to go see the body and pay my respects.
Mm. Yeah, because it's probably there's kind of a contrast to it, say like in like vampirism there, like people, you
Yes.
know, so people like digging up bodies and they're still being like they haven't died, that they're still the
Hmm.
walking dead, as they said. It's I suppose it's most familiar in these countries. In other continents, does it happen? Like I suppose in Africa, or is there
Well, I
any
mentioned,
case?
I don't know if it happened in India with Saint Francis Xavier, who was a Jesuit missionary who died while en route from India to Japan. And part of his body, with the exception of his right arm, is preserved in Goa, India. And then I mentioned Mother Wilhelmina here in Missouri of the United States, where it happened. And I do know of Saint Rose of Lima, Peru, who was also, though not displayed, was found to be incorrupt when she was unburied in the 18th century. Uh, I don't know of any parts of Africa if that's happened. I'm sure there's some phenomenon, or it might have happened in another place. On the other side of it, you were mentioning vampirism. Here in America, in the state of Rhode Island, we had Mercy Brown, who during who died during a consumption pandemic, and
Mm,
her body they had uncovered because there was a vampire panic. This was in the 1870s, I believe. And
okay.
when they unburied her body, she was found after weeks of being in the soil to be perfectly preserved. And most horrifically, they found that there was still red blood in her heart. And so they did this really, it's just interesting because, it goes from how a Catholic in the 1600s might look at that versus, a Puritan family in the 19th century uncovering it. And they panicked and did an interesting, bizarre folk magic ritual about burning her heart and everything like that. And she became the vampire of Rhode Island.
Yes. Yeah, it just shows you it couldn't, depending on where you are based, what's the main religion, and what you may have done in your life, and maybe how you died is probably whether you're going to go into sainthood or be, starving in Dracula. It's an interesting thought there. I suppose the land would have a thing about it, as you said. Like, I suppose, would incorruptibles be more found around places like, as you said, like Ossuary Churches as well? Would there be a kind of combination there as well? Because you'd have to dig up the bodies to, as he, what's it, what was it they call it, grave recycling, grave recycling.
Grave
To dig up
cycling,
the bodies.
yes.
Yes. Would that be kind of common with these places?
It's common in those places, and especially with the Catholic Church being how we do saints and relics. Usually, when someone is declared, they're declared a servant of God, which is the first step towards canonization, meaning their life has been examined, their works have been examined, and they were found not to be, that there was nothing against the Catholic Church, that they lived a good life. Oftentimes in that phase, we just had a situation here. She wasn't preserved, but she was a woman who was very saintly, a former slave who became well known for her charitable works, who died in the 1880s. We moved her body from the graveyard to the cathedral. And that is a very common thing even today to, okay, they're declared a servant of God. We're going to move their body during the rest of the canonization process. And that's often when they'll start finding incorruptibility.
Yeah, I've seen it. I think it is. I don't know if it's like a feast day in Philippines, or I think it's kind of a custom that they take the body out as it is. I'm not. I might be just barking up the wrong tree now. If somebody's on the internet, then they may be able to find out. But I think they bring up the body there of a loved one there, and I think they kind of do have a meal or some sort of ritual or party. I'm not too sure there. And I've seen it in Philippines as well. They take up the bodies where there's houses in graveyards there, and they take up the bones of the people that have, after a few years, because it's such a small nation, and I think there's a shorter space that they take up the bodies, and I don't know what happens to them afterwards there. But it's a very interesting subject there. So we'll probably come to the competition time. I'm going to talk about Catholic ghost stories there, which is another great subject there. But first of all, we have Irene. If you're still there, I need a number from you between 1 and 4, 5 and 8, and 9 and 12. So a number between 1 and 4, 5 and 8, and 9 and 12. And same with you, Eugene, as well. If you're still there, I just need a number between 1 and 4, 5 and 8, and 9 and 12. So I give you a few moments there. So yes, we're going to be talking about Catholic ghost stories. I suppose the first, I'll let them type away and then I'll fill that in. What is the Catholic Church's views on ghosts? I know you don't have to answer that there if you know of.
It's complicated, but Thomas Aquinas probably put it best in his Summa Theologica. He discusses the possibility of the dead visiting the living, and he concludes that basically that those in heaven can do so on their own volition, whereas those in purgatory might be allowed to visit the living for because of God's permission for various reasons, namely to get more prayers or to remind people of the afterlife, or in some cases to chastise them. And he brings up a couple of stories. He brings up a case from St. Augustine, who discusses of the appearance of St. Felix of Nola, who appeared This we would probably, Catholics might be uncomfortable calling it a haunting or a ghost, but he appeared to the city of Nola when it was under siege to reassure the people and to let them know that they would be okay. Then there is another case from Saint Gregory the Great, who was a very powerful Pope of Rome in the 7th and 6th centuries, and he tells a very strange story of a deacon named Pasakias who lived sometime in the 500s. Pasakias was, by all accounts, a really good man, but he supported a papal schism when there were two people vying for the power of the Pope, and he died in that state of schism. A couple years after his death, the Bishop of Capua was down in the thermal baths, and he starts seeing through the steam what he first thinks is a servant, but to his horror was actually the deacon Pasakias, his ghost.
Right.
And he asks immediately, "What are you doing here? Why are you haunting this bathhouse?" And Pasakias tells him, because of the schism, he is stuck in purgatory and has to long wander these halls looking for prayers, and he asks for masses to be said for him. The Bishop of Capua does what he promised to do. Says several masses for the soul of Pasakias, and Pasakias' ghost was never seen again. And Thomas Aquinas uses both these stories to show that, yes, there is a tradition of ghost stories within the Catholic Church, and that we are open to the possibility of ghosts. And then there's, of course, plenty of folk legends that come from various sources, medieval through the modern ages. Over in the British Isles, you have what are called the Byland Abbey ghosts, which were a collection of ghost stories written in a manuscript on blank pages. Some anonymous monk just wrote down these 14 ghost stories from the local Yorkshire area.
Okay. And it's I was going to talk about the well, was there any moral or any reason for the why is it Saint Nora of Felix? Why did he appear at the siege? Was there a reason why? Was it? I think I've seen you write a bit about it. Was it just to give courage to those that were having with invaders coming?
Yes, so it was during the barbarian, pardon me, invasions of Rome. So they were
Mm,
under siege by the Vandals, and he comes in to basically reassure them that they'll survive the siege and get through the night. And so it was considered for all the people of the town who, and according to Augustine, dozens of people experienced the ghost of St. Felix, and all of them say that it was, it steeled their resolve. It gave them a little bit of encouragement because they could see somebody was watching over them.
mm,
It's not too different, even though it's the body of the deceased. I'm sorry, the shade of a deceased person. Saint
mm.
Michael the Archangel has a habit of appearing to people during sieges and doing the same thing, reassuring people that they'll survive through the siege and that they'll be able to hold the line. And
Okay.
so it's a thing that does happen, especially in medieval Catholic literature.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. And like, did if history, I don't know if you know, did they survive the siege? Or was that time?
Yes, yes. In the case of the siege of Nola, they did survive and managed to hold off, and the
Mm,
Vandals have relented and moved on to another less defended city.
mm,
In the case of Saint Michael's apparitions, he's either appeared. Oftentimes, he appears to tell people about the siege, and they usually survive,
mm,
or he shows up to alert them that a plague is finally leaving, and that most famously happened in Rome.
okay. Can you divulge a bit more?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah,
So
was
Saint
that when?
Michael, if you go to Rome, you'll see near the Vatican Castel San Angelo, which has a giant statue of Saint Michael the Archangel putting his
Mm,
sword in his sheath. That was based off a vision of Gregory the Great. Once again,
mm,
he during a massive plague going on in Rome during the 600s, he had done processions and prayers to lift the plague. And one day he had a vision. He looked upon the castle, which was not always a castle, but he saw on the very top a figure of St. Michael the Archangel putting his sword back in his sheath, which he understood to mean the plague was finally relenting and that they would be delivered from it. And after which they built, of course, this monument to St. Michael that's been there and replaced by various artists. And it's thus the castle still bears his name since then.
Hmm. And like, I don't these. You mentioned witnesses there. The people witnessed there, so there's multiple witnesses, which make a kind of an account of a ghost appearing more
Mm-hmm.
substantial there. But is there always a sort of, like you mentioned? I was the Pascha the ghost of the ghost appearing in the bathe
Yes.
in the baths. Is there usual moral story? There's a kind of story with these appearances of ghosts in Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm,
Yes. So, like, for example, I mentioned the Byland Abbey ghosts. Those are
hmm,
more folklore than anything, but what we hear in a lot of those stories is usually the ghost is looking for prayers to get out of purgatory, or
hmm,
they need to get forgiveness from a particular person they had wronged, some type of unfinished work. One of the
hmm,
stories, the ghost bothers a tailor to go to a monk who he had stolen from in life to get the monk to forgive him for the stolen goods because he was stuck in purgatory until he could receive that forgiveness. And
yeah,
so the man, does his journey. Finds the monk, says, "Hey, this ghost wants forgiveness." The monk goes, "Oh, that's strange." Writes a letter of forgiveness, and
hmm,
then he proceeds to go back to the ghost, and the ghost disappears after he is given this. My favorite story from the Byline that shows how the strangeness of Catholic ghost stories is a Robert of Southwell, I believe is his name. He died mysteriously, but the town kept seeing his ghost everywhere. But even less like a ghost, it was more like his body got up, a revenant of sorts, and would just wander the town, would stare inside of windows and frighten people. People were afraid to come out of their towns, so one day a group of youth decided that they were going to wait in the churchyard and beat up the ghost as young
right.
men solution
As
to
you
every young man's problems.
yes, yes,
But as Robert came, all the young men, with the exception of another Robert Foxton, was the only one who stayed behind, and he grapples with the ghost, wrestles it, and drags it to the foot of a church and waits for a priest to come over. A priest comes and demands of the ghost, in the name of the Holy Trinity, just what are you doing here? And he
hmm,
says, according to the manuscript, his voice was like coming from the bottom of a jar, just echoey and empty. But he said that he had never gone to confession and he needed to have his confessions heard, and he was hoping someone would ask him. So the priest hears his confession, binds the living Robert to not speak what the dead Robert told, and no one ever heard from the dead Robert again. And so
right.
all these stories, it's usually looking for some type of forgiveness.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, as I suppose there's no there's I suppose there's no being there's accounts of just people s- seeing ghosts and no actual morals or to them there. Do you do you think the church would would it get more national attention or international attention if the church actually, you know, uh, publicised about ghosts that they appear and that they're not to do with like demons as it most commonly with exorcisms as well, which is kind of all the time popular. But if there is a research even done by the church into these kind of afterlife survival that you know of.
Yes, I know of mostly medievalists,
Mm,
especially from England. Medievalists will often talk about like the church's evolving understanding of what ghosts are and what they do, because
mm,
there's still Catholic ghost stories that get produced here in America, even into the modern day. And I would, I would love it if we had an actual. I don't know of any formal like church run study of ghosts in the church, but I would
Mm.
love one because there are so many great stories that have come from Catholic history, and they give
Mm.
us an interesting idea into not only what Catholics think today, but especially what Catholics in the Middle Ages or earlier thought about
Mm.
life and death. And so I would love a more formal study conducted by the church.
Yeah, because I know, I think there's an observatory. I don't just touching away from ghosts at the moment, but I know there's the
Sure.
church. The church is funded. I think it's true anyway. Funded an observatory somewhere in America, and it's looking towards extraterrestrial life there.
Yes.
What's the church's stances on extraterrestrial life?
Oh, that's a hard one. Um,
so,
I don't.
so
Oh no, no, I love it. Pope Francis straight up said that he would baptize an alien and they should be considered just like us.
mm,
So he would have no problem with that.
okay.
Uh, Various other popes have talked about the possibility of intelligent life. It's always maybe, and
Mm.
we'll know when we find it. But I don't know if there's ever been an official like declaration said by anyone.
Yeah, and going back to Ghosts again, has there been any
Sure.
fascinating and any stories of popes appearing or anything happening before their death? You know, the recent death of Pope Francis there.
Hmm.
Has there been any apparitions of popes appearing?
There are various stories of popes that will appear, especially around Rome, particularly if the Galleria Borghese, which is one of the most beautiful art museums, but it's also the home to one of the most powerful families in Roman history. The
Mm,
Borgheses are still a powerful family. Many of
mm,
them were popes. Pope Paul V, who built the Vatican, he made sure his family name Borghese was on the front of the church. And there are stories about Paul V being seen around the Galleria Borghese, which was his home. It was his art collection. So people will see images of him, and he was a very distinguished looking man with the beard and everything. So
mm,
I know of that story. I don't know of any recent ones. It would not surprise me in the least if popes come around once in a while either because they have something unfinished they have to do because there were many
mm,
sinful popes who probably need a little forgiveness, and
mm.
there's certainly some that would leave an impact that would kind of almost play again like a recording of these popes. So I would not be surprised if there's more modern popes, but I know of at least that one in the Borghese.
Mm. You just brought about going back to incorruptibility, so I'm swerving it all around again.
Oh sure.
But wasn't there a pope that uh, brought a former dug, or he didn't dig, but he got his own
Yes.
people to dig up a pope and put him on trial, a dead pope on
Yes.
trial. Is that correct?
Yes. That was Stephen the fourth or sixth, and he dug up Pope Formosus. This was in the ninth century,
Hmm.
during just some great political upheaval.
Hmm.
I wrote about it also in my book, but effectively, Pope Formosus had died and was kind of a controversial pope. Like, he had been excommunicated once during his time as a priest.
Yes.
Uh, so his successor dug him up and dressed him up in his papal garments, put him on the chair in St. John Lateran's, one of the churches in Rome, and held what we now call the Cadaver Synod. And that was, he shouted it something just straight out of like Game of Thrones or a metal music video. He shouted
Wow.
at the corpse, accused him of all these awful things. As a final insult to desecrate the body, he cut off the three fingers on his right hand that were used for consecrating priests,
Oh
and then
wow.
threw the rest of the body in the river.
Wow. Geez, yeah. I know this happened a good few. I think over a century ago, didn't it? I think that's what it was. But so you've written the weird Catholic handbook there. Was it? When did you release it? There. When was it published?
It was published in November of last year, 2024, so just about a year ago.
Hmm. And is there any? Is there any stories there? What would people expect to find in a book?
Oh, they'll find. I divided it into 4 sections. So the first section is saints and monsters. That's where you can learn all about. I go to Ireland a couple times in that section because to talk about the werewolves of Ossuary and things like that.
Hmm.
And then
Yes.
second section is all about memento mori. So that's where I talk about bone churches and incorruptibles. And then the third section is what I call campfire stories. So that's things like ghosts, demons, things of that. And then the last section is unusual miracles. A story I think a lot of people won't find in any other book because there's only been a couple books written about it is a famous American, well, not so famous, but a strange American haunting called the Wizard Cliff
Hmm.
that took place in Appalachia. So in our southern mountainous states, the mountains of what is now West Virginia. And
Right.
this family had invited not invited, but they was during a stormy night, and a man came into their house from Ireland who was not doing well. He was clearly on death's door, so he asked for shelter from the storm. The family gave him a bed and got him some food, but he was clearly dying, so he asked for a priest to give him last rites. The family was Lutheran, and they didn't want to bring a priest over. Plus, the closest priest was 40 miles away by horseback, and there was still a great storm rising. So
Hmm.
unfortunately, the stranger died in his bed without last rites. And almost immediately, the hauntings began. This was happening in the 1790s. So, right at the
Okay.
birth of the American Republic, they
Yes.
couldn't keep candles lit in the room. And then the phenomena kept getting more increasingly violent. It became what might be considered the first poltergeist case in the United States.
Right.
But it got its name, the Wizard Cliff, because the family would hear the closing and opening of phantom shears, and then they would find their handkerchiefs, their shirts, the bed linens cut up. Sometimes no explanation. They had things secured in trunks, and the poltergeist would still find a way to get in there and cut things up. It
Hmm.
began killing their animals and their livestock, and it took
Hmm.
a very long time. With the family ended up converting to Catholicism through the course
Right.
of this because the Catholics were the only ones who seemed to know what to do about this weird poltergeist case, and they did a full exorcism on
Right.
the house. So if people haven't
Yeah.
looked, please Google Wizard Clip after the show is done. It is the I'm really underselling it, but it is a fascinating ghost story. And like I said, it might be the first poltergeist case in U.S. history.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I'll look that up there. It's that's very fascinating. As you mentioned, the werewolves of Ossuary there, because what
Yes.
is that again? Because I don't know about it there myself, and I mentioned Kilkenny
Yeah.
there earlier on because it's
Okay.
around that area, isn't it?
Yeah. So it was a monk was heading to County Meath. I can't remember where he was traveling from, but he was there with a servant, and they stopped to camp for a night. And all of a sudden, a wolf comes out of the woods, and this, of course, frightened them. And if it couldn't be even stranger, the wolf starts to talk with human speech, assuring them that he meant no harm and he did not want to cause them any trouble. The priest was not sure what was going on, so he made a sign of the cross and demanded that the wolf tell him who he was and what he was doing. The wolf surprisingly gave Catholic answers and seemed to know everything about the Trinity and things like that. So after some
Right.
conversation, they find out that the wolf and the she wolf were actually humans who were cursed every 7 years to take on the form of wolves after they had barked heresies at a saint. I
Right.
can't remember the saint's name, but they had barked heresies at him. So he placed a curse upon them that every 7 years they would take on the shape of wolves.
Right.
But the she wolf was dying, and they were wanting the priest to come and give her last rites. The
Hmm.
priest follows the wolf, still terrified out of all things that he could imagine. And when he approaches the she wolf, he's still not sure because priests don't give sacraments to animals, so this was not
Hmm.
something he could do. But the wolves
Right.
assured him that they were human and were even able to show that they normally held human form. So he gave last rites in the Eucharist to the she wolf, and then the she died peacefully, and then the male wolf walks him back to camp, giving him prophecies of Ireland and this was in the 1200s and what is to come with the Norman invasion and everything like that. So it's
Right.
a little case of when the monster, because usually when Catholics encounter monsters, it's like a spiritual battle. There's the sign of the
Yeah.
cross, there's the exorcism. In this case,
Yes.
the monster was Christian.
Yes. Yeah, it's difficult. I've got to mention something again there, a bit different there.
Sure.
Bridget wants to name what's the name of the book. It sounds very interesting.
Oh, so it's my book here, Weird Catholic Handbook, and you can get it on Amazon or any other bookstores. And yeah, I would love it if people read it. There's a lot of fun stories I collected in there, and ultimately, what I wanted to do was retell these stories and get people telling them again.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know anything about Ossuary. I can't even say it properly. Ossuary Churches and Incorruptibles. There, going back, touching as you mentioned, like as you said that usually there's a fight between like those in the Catholic faith against kind of animals or like kind of cryptids, as you would probably say in our kind of
Yes.
realm, like mostly serpents. I know there's a tale of a lake serpent that appeared, and I forget now which saint it was in Ireland there, but told us drove the serpent away. Is the serpent is a kind of would that reflect kind of paganism? Would it be? And
Hmm.
do these cryptids, as you said, serpents? Is it mainly paganism? They represent paganism, but is it mainly there's always battles with this kind of animal?
Yes, so they represent, especially when it's dragons or serpents,
Mm,
depending on who you ask, a lot of times it's understood to represent the chaos of pre Christianity. The
mm,
sort of, Satan is often depicted as a dragon and things like that. Serpents are
mm,
often depicted as just the natural chaos that we established. That's why you have the phrase, here be dragons, just pointing out we're way away from civilization now.
mm,
And they represent kind of that primeval chaos order that then, if from a Catholic understanding, is God bringing order to the chaos by breeding a saint. You were talking about that was Saint Patrick at Loudurg, who
mm.
who found a serpent. Uh, I'm forgetting her name for the life of me, but she was actually born. It turned out that anthropologists figured out she bore the a variation of a Celtic goddess
Right.
and was living in this lake. So there's some definitely like symbolism of Christianity overtaking paganism as well.
Yeah, yeah. There's because I think this is another saint there. I forget now. I forget now the name. It's on the Lake Cuculaw. It's in County Cork, and
Ooh.
we did a little investigation ourselves. We just went on the lake. It was just a leisurely
Hmm.
thing. We went to see if there was any serpents there. You just never know because Killarney, which I live in, Killarney, there is tales of serpents there, and
Okay.
it has been filmed, but there's people could say then as well. It's an eel. There's
Mm.
eels in that water there, so they're kind of overgrown eels there. But yeah, touching on something else there, and completely, I'm going all over the place here, but it's brilliant. I love
Sure.
it. Marian apparitions there. So the Mary, Jesus's mother there, she's appeared many times in Ireland. There was the fascination of it in the 80s, I think, the
Hmm.
80s, early 90s, the 70s, it could be there. Did these, I remember the Catholic Church saying at that time there that they kind of withdrew from this kind of craze of people seeing it there. And I suppose the tears that run through the statues as well. Do they, as these Marian apparitions happening a lot more, or are they kind of died down a bit? What's the church's views on it now, do you reckon?
The church is very, I would say, circumspect about like Marian
Mm,
apparitions, where
mm,
there's obviously the approved ones like Knock, Lourdes, Fatima, things like that, the really big
mm,
ones that your grandma went to.
mm,
Um, or at least my grandma did. And, they're very, those are the ones that get church approval. But then there's also within, especially folk Catholicism, of Mary's appearance in the strangest of places at the strangest of times. And the church is always very cautious about that because it could be superstition, psychosis, it could be a number of things going on to make people see it. But at the same time, among your typical lay Catholic, there's an excitement about the possibility of Mary appearing again, that, if she is appearing to a visionary, and I remember reading, she was appearing to a visionary in upstate New York here in the States, and that created a lot of, even as the church would say, we don't approve this, we're still investigating it, nothing has been said. The people themselves will flock to it in droves, even without official church permission. So it's a fascinating, the Catholic Church how it tries to still be a mystical, supernatural belief system in a very materialist world is always fascinating to me, because that balance is a hard one, and I don't know that we always do it well, but it's an interesting one.
It's great that, not in that way there, but it's great as well. I suppose it's coming around like a paranormal investigator there, see it. And that's great that the Catholic Church doesn't completely draw on that and glorify it when they have to investigate it as well. It's great that they do that as well. And it's great, as he says, with exorcisms as well. I think the church does as well. They go and they need to see, has to see a physician before any other act is done, before that person is, especially with demons and that possession. But as he said, I think there was the case in, I think it was Cork. I don't know where it was, with the Marian apparition there. And I think the thing that they kind of found out afterwards was that it's because it was a bank over the statue, and people were kind of uneven standing on the bank, and it was causing them to they couldn't find the right bearing, so it makes it look like the statue is moving in the distance, and they're lighting from where the sunlight is coming in. That was causing these kind of situations where they think that Mary was moving, the statue of Mary was moving.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, so the legs were sort of bent. People would have to be naturally bent, and so that after a time, after staring at Mary, she would move. But it's very fascinating there, Bridget. So that was the wizard clip there. That's what Michael was on about there. So we're going to probably head off soon there. But can you tell us where people can buy? You said it's Amazon there. Do you have any plans to write another book of any interest?
I'm exploring. I'm currently in the midst of researching St. Michael and his apparitions, because I think they're not as well known, and I find it fascinating that he shows up in the strangest of places. He showed up most recently in 1917 at Fatima. He made an apparition there. So it's fascinating. There actually is a line of church that some call the Sword of St. Michael that starts in Skellig Michael off of the coast of Ireland. And then all the way down to Jerusalem is this straight line of churches where St. Michael is said to have made an appearance, and they all line up together. So it's a fascinating bit of history with a lot of weird paranormal stuff going on. So I'm hoping I'll make a book of it, but we'll see. I'm still in the research process.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, that's like ley lines. You could be talking about ley lines as well. It's kind of that kind of thing, Yeah, and like I touch on Eugene. Yeah, Eugene says I think it was Ballincollig, County Cork. Yeah, I think it was around there. That was the hill and the statue of Mary there down below, and people congregating.
Fascinating.
But that is an interesting case there. I think there's documentaries. It should be on YouTube as well. It's, as you mentioned, the angels there. I'm kind of fond with myself. I think it's a Megatron. Is it no? Metatron. Sorry,
Metatron.
That's it. No, Transformers.
Megatron makes an appearance in Fatima.
No, we don't want that happening. We don't want that happening. There's Optimus Prime where you need him, like, but Metatron is, I think, is one of these like kind of sub angels, like, but it's not more to do with kind of the mystical, kind of a cult kind of side there, Has there been any cases of Raphael and Ariel appearing as well as ghosts of apparitions?
Raphael is one, like, I only know of his biblical apparitions in the Book of Tobit, but he does appear in a couple of other cases, namely, usually associated with Marian apparitions. He'll be there. He and Gabriel will sometimes show up there to announce, Mary's coming or whatever. You saw something like that at Fatima in Portugal, where an angel that declared himself the Angel of Portugal was the first one to make an appearance, and then Mary came a few days later.
Yeah, it's interesting, as you said, like they could like angels or the apparitions appear just when cases when there's like wars or like natural disasters or, as you said, plagues there. Just probably one of the last questions: has there been anything recent that has appeared over the last like few decades with things that have happened around the world with angels?
There's the controversial Marian apparitions of Medjugorje, which is down in the former Balkans nations. That happened through the 80s and 90s. The apparitions continued. Okay. It's still being investigated by the church, but it's already become one of the most popular pilgrimage sites in the world. And with a lot of very, including members of my family, very fervent believers that these were true apparitions. Still being investigated, so we'll see. But that was happening in through the 90s. And then there was the Our Lady of Kiebo, I think is how you pronounce it, in Rwanda. And she is said to have appeared right before the Rwandan genocide to warn people of a coming catastrophe. And that happened again in the 1980s. So they still happen. Whether they'll be made official in my lifetime or not, we'll see. But people still see things.
Yeah, it's interesting. My mum went to Medjugorje there a few years ago.
Oh, yes.
There. Yes, she enjoyed it a lot there, and she fell over. I know there's a bit of a climb. She fell over there. Good job. I asked her, did you fall up the mountain? She said no. It'd be a miracle if we did.
Yes, it would.
I fell up the mountain. Well, you were up the mountain, but you didn't fall upwards. You fell down. Anyway, she's fine there, my mom, which is great.
Good.
Bridget says, I would be very interested in a book about. Saint Michael. Yeah, so stay tuned with Michael, and hopefully, when do you reckon you have that next book out? Or
within a year.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to get a book out. It's hard to try and concentrate and get the
yes,
to have the time to do it there. It's really been great to talk to you there, Michael. There, I'm just going to go through the competition and just show a trailer first before we go.
Sure.
So we'll do the trailer first. So this is for the Halloween Extravaganza 5, and this is at Redwood Castle. This is the trailer, Redwood, Hide or Shriek, and so features an investigation at Redwood Castle, County Tipperary, and will be shown as the premiere of Friday, the 24th of October, and it's an investigation conducted by Pucker Vogue Paranormal. So here it is, the trailer.
Hide and shriek, the children play, not knowing what stalks the darkened way.
Now that was worth another time.
Whispers crawl through floorboards deep. Something wakes that should still sleep.
Are you hiding from someone?
and one less voice will rise today.
Oh, wow, I've seen that. Go Margaret, Arish.
Thank you so much.
Wow, that is amazing. I got that.
So yes, that was a Redwood Hide and Shriek, Hide or Shriek trailer. That's coming out on the 24th of October, Friday the 24th, on a Halloween Extravaganza 5 show. And now the competition time. And now, Michael, you might have a chance to enter our Halloween competition, Mega Draw, our Halloween Mega Draw. If one of the contestants here, Irene or Eugene, picks your name out of these boxes. So, Irene, you picked numbers 4, 8, and 9, and Eugene, you picked 4, 7, and 8. Kind of similar. Good luck, everybody. Let's see how you got on. So it's a chance to enter your name into the Halloween Mega Draw. Eugene and Irene. And I also put Michael's name in. Number 4. Oh, Michael, you're in it. And it's picked you twice. So your name is in the Halloween Mega Draw twice. Amazing.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
That is great. And because they picked you the next same number, you go in twice there, so you're in there, Michael. So Irene picks number 8 and Eugene picked number 7. Let's see how this went. Number 7 and 8. Let's see how we get on. There, Michael, you're in. Again.
Oh my gosh. I need to go buy a real lottery ticket today.
And Eugene, you've got your name into the Halloween Mega Draw. And you're both still in it now. You're both still in it there, Irene and Eugene. Chance to get €40 now. This will be the first time. Maybe one of you gets it. Irene, you pick number 9. Eugene, you pick number... Eugene, you didn't pick... Did you pick number 8? Oh, no. Okay. All right, so... No. €40, Irene. You've got €40. Wow, you won the top 5 there, Irene. €40. Yeah. Oh, Eugene, I don't think you selected the last number. Oh, no. But I think you got your name in the Halloween Mega Draw anyway. I have to look back all on that anyway. God, that's great. Great stuff. Your name's in the Halloween Mega Draw times 3.
Wow.
That's great. That's great. Very good. Very good. And there's not many names in it, so you might win loads of little prizes for Overcoming. You might be getting a postal package in the next month.
Sweet.
So yes, for the next show there, folks, is with great pleasure that we greet Paul Weatherhead, a historian, author, writer, and researcher onto the show. Subjects will comprise of Weird Calderdale, Alan Godfrey, Alien Encounter, and Phantoms of Christmas Past. So we've gone a bit more festive before Halloween, Christmassy. So it's going to be all like that. Jonathan says, enjoy tonight. Thanks. Yes. Thank you, Michael. It's been a real pleasure in talking to you. Very fascinating there. Irene says, wow, treat yourselves to ice cream on me. Oh, no. I said that, we'll be sending that over there, Irene, over after Halloween there. You'll have the money there. Great listening to you both. Oh, cheers, Bridget. Great, she said both, which is brilliant. That includes me.
Yes.
But thank you, everyone. Thank you for everyone who contributed today on the show there. Jonathan, Paul, Irene, Jonathan, Eugene, Bridget. Thank you for all tuning in there. Quiva as well there. TJ as well. Brilliant show there. It's great catching it. And Eugene says it was supposed to be 9. Okay. Oh no, yeah. You're saying that now. You get €40. Irene says thank you both for being on the show. Yes, Michael. Thank you for being on, and have a great evening there. And the weekend's just begun here as well. And everyone else, have a great time there and enjoy the weekend too. I won't see you next time. I'll see you in the near distance. Goodbye for now, folks. Goodbye. Keep waving, Michael. I'm only joking. I don't press stop yet. Here we go. See you, everyone. Bye.